Hey, clocked it.
Rise from your grave.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? So, the Paper Mario series is once again causing people to come out of the woodwork and declare that Nintendo are dead to their fans' pleas of what they believe to be the true heart and soul of a Paper Mario game. I would say I bet these are the same fans who moaned about the art direction of the Wind Waker, or declared that Super Mario 3D World is not a true 3D Mario. But at the same time, I bet half of these so-called fans weren't even old enough to play the originals of many of these games when they came out. Although, we shouldn't really use that as an excuse, although I suppose there is also still weight to that. What a lot of so-called Nintendo fans don't actually see or like is the fact that the vast majority of core Nintendo IPs change their formula with almost every release, retaining elements of what it once was, of course, but whilst trying something new to change things up. Nintendo games and Nintendo themselves have always been like this. Always. You have Super Mario Bros. 1, 2, 3 and Super Mario World. They're just vastly different games. It's only until you reach the new Super Mario Bros. Series that repetition and fatigue starts to set in, with me and many others, calling for Mario to return to 2D glory with something fresh and original, like his original outings. The Legends of Zelda, from the NES all the way through to Breath of the Wild, has dabbled in a multitude of different gameplay and art directions. Whether the player is tackling puzzles between different dimensions, going back and forth between time to change the future and past, running on a 3-day clock cycle, completely changing its art style into the most beautiful cartoon video game you've ever seen, changing into animals, being forced to use motion controls to drastically change up even the most common of Zelda enemies and puzzles, or being thrown into a vast physics weather heavy world where the gameplay is left up to the player to decide. Zelda has changed more than most Nintendo series, and of course, the fans, I do that with quotations, will moan, whenever it doesn't comply to what they perceive as the Zelda standards, once again in quotations. 3D Mario games, don't stand still. Yet you conjure up the same fanboys and fangirls who declare that every 3D Mario should have a hub world like Super Mario 64. Mario Sunshine gave the plumber an additional set of world-tackling moves. That made Mario, in the right hands, move unlike any other 3D platformer of that era, or even many after. But of course, Mario doesn't need a power-up like Flood, even though Mario has always been about power-ups increasing his standard abilities. Metro games haven't stood still. Even if you look at the Prime trilogy, seeing as we're getting a fourth entry at some point, between Prime 1 and 2, those games are utterly distinct unto their own. Sure, they carry over a basic feel of what the Prime series likes to focus on, but there's no denying that each game stands on its own. Something which is hard to say about many Kirby games or even Pokemon games. Something which you'll hear me and many others groan about, begging for some real substantial change to these series which have grown long in the tooth, in my opinion. I suppose then you might say, but clocked it, didn't you do a video where you were begging for more of the same? With the likes of F-Zero, Wave Race, Pilot Wings and 1080 as examples? Yes, I did. But the difference with those series is that we haven't seen them in over a decade, some longer. And even industry standards like HD and online play would make new entries to these series utterly worthwhile in a multitude of ways. But I can bet you this. If they didn't change that much and were released in the same way other Nintendo IPs were released, maybe multiple entries in a single generation, even I would eventually beg for something different. I could say the same I can say the same for other dormant Nintendo IPs like Golden Sun and Advance Wars, games I owned every entry for, played them at the time, and their final entries started speaking the same tired tale that many IPs start to speak if they don't change up too much, and it's probably why we haven't seen them return, whether it's because of sales numbers or Nintendo looking at them and saying if these return they need to be different in many ways than before. But then my argument for those games would go back to the same argument for F-Zero and stuff like that. For Golden Sun, for Advance Wars, we've never seen these games on a home console, never seen Golden Sun in 3D. If they went along the lines of Xenoblade or something, there's a lot you could do different, completely different than what these games have done before. And you perhaps saw me doing a video on what I'd love to see in Metroid Prime 4. I said that the game didn't need revolution right now, just evolution on what it previously brought. And once again, given that this will be the first HD Metroid game, you'll have the visuals, which will hopefully bring along the physics, as well as the use of Joy-Cons, unique features. If this turns out to be nothing more than like, let's say a Metroid Prime 1, but in HD, don't get me wrong, it could, and most likely will still be a great game. But I said the same thing about Prime 3. If that game didn't try something new, like it did with the Wiimote and Nunchuck, then after Prime 2, Metroid Prime 3 would have felt like more of the same, and that wouldn't have been so great. Even in my Pikmin 4 video, I asked for online co-op, new and different moves for the Pikmin, which would actually greatly change the combat, the type of moves I asked for, as well as different time zones to adventure in, something that would be completely different for the series. What I don't want is Pikmin 3.5, once again, I'm sure it'll be great, but trust me people, you will feel that being there and done that a lot this time around. If they'd done that, just like many people felt with Splatoon 2, or Mario Maker 2, or even Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. And we feel the same way about, we probably feel the same way about Mario Kart 9 if that doesn't change something dramatically or drastically. Like something, like perhaps becoming Nintendo Kart instead, which could open up a whole world of different things for the series, whether it's items, tracks, obviously characters and stuff. It's also why, I think it's also why people are fearing that Breath of the Wild 2 might perhaps reuse too much of the recent Hyrule that we've combed over for the last 3 years. Breath of the Wild 2 needs to be different in many ways if it plans to grab you again. And like all Zelda titles, I'm sure Nintendo will offer something different, so that Breath of the Wild 2 is indeed its own unique sequel that can set itself apart from the original. So when it comes to Paper Mario, Origami King, and how that series retains much of what it was but tries something different each time, I don't blame Nintendo for doing this. We've had a Paper Mario game on every single Nintendo console since the N64. Do you really want the same games but with different stories each time? I say, look at what's happened to Pokemon and Kirby and ask that question again. I say, look at other IPs from other developers who have pumped out the same game over and over, and ask yourself that question. I bought Borderlands 3 after being a huge fan of the first and second game, but even by the second game, I was like, okay, when the third game arrives, it needs to be greatly different in some way to hold me. And unfortunately, the third game has, for the most part, turned out to be more of the same and hasn't held me in anywhere near the same way. I love it when Nintendo experiments. Something I spoke about in a previous video. Some experiments work, some don't. But without those experiments, we end up sitting still, playing the same stuff over and over. Nintendo sometimes are the only ones who see this, whether their so-called fans agree or not. Personally, I'm looking forward to the Origami King. It has a completely new battle system than before, new gimmicks, a new art style, and perhaps that can be better than worrying about collecting experience points for the sake of seeing numbers increase. Whether it be, whether it'll be a good or bad game has nothing to do with the direction it has taken. It's all about the execution, and that's what I'll judge it on personally. So yeah, those are my thoughts on just Nintendo games in general, and you can apply this to the industry in general. I've gone off so many series that I used to love. The original first 2 or even 3 entries tried to do stuff different, and they were great. But then they kind of settled into the same old, and you just fall off them. And it's why you watch all these events and see Assassin's Creed Valhalla and just go, yeah, looks more of the same. Or you'll see other games just go, yep. I'm sure it's going to be great, but it's not exactly exciting because we've been there and done that. Once again, I've said this before in another video, let Nintendo experiment. We'll judge the game on itself, whether it's good or bad. That's the whole nother story unto itself, whole nother discussion unto itself. That's why people review games. But then at the same time, people always go back to older games and say, yeah, but this game done that. But, anyway, I'm going off for 1 year. Yeah, let me know your thoughts. I'm looking forward to Paper Mario Origami King. Mine should arrive on time. Let me know if you're excited about the game. Let me know your feelings about the direction of the Paper Mario series, how it keeps on changing, but still retaining a lot of what it once was. I think a lot of people don't always focus on the change too much, but don't focus on what has been, retained. And it is a lot. It's not a completely different, utterly different series. It's really not. But yeah, let me know your thoughts. As always, thanks for listening. Take care all, and peace.
Out of respect for our princess, you may keep your lives. Now go!